My wife went to meet with old friends, ignoring my pleas. Later, I found out she cheated, breaking my trust and our marriage. Unfortunately, I found myself in need of some support and stumbled upon this forum, hoping to get some advice. A little background about me. I'm 30, my wife is 25, and we've been married for 3 years, together for almost 6. We don't have any kids, no real assets to speak of, and we're honestly drowning in more debt than we have cash. We rent a house, and I'm the primary breadwinner, bringing home about $4,000 a month, while she nets around $1,500. I work my butt off to give her the life she's gotten used to, but now I'm facing something I never thought I'd have to. At work, we're a pretty close-knit group, and one of my coworkers, who I've known for almost 3 years, invited me to join a recreational soccer league. I've been playing in it for about 2 years now. My wife used to come to every game, which I thought was her showing support, but deep down, I always felt like she was more into the alcohol that flowed freely at these events than the game itself. While I'd take it easy, she'd often get pretty tipsy as a spectator, but I'd drive her home, thinking nothing of it. After the games, a bunch of us, guys and girls, would sometimes get together and hang out at someone's place, or we'd hit up a bar or grab some pizza. A few times, we even had everyone over at our place. A couple of weeks ago, after one of the games, the group planned to meet up at one of the guys' houses, a bit farther away. I told them that I couldn't make it because I had work early the next morning and needed to get some rest. On the ride home, my wife was texting one of the guys in the group, someone I had considered a friend. She asked him for a ride to the get-together, and then she turned to me, asking if it was okay if she went. I said no. I told her I had work in the morning and wanted to spend the night with her. What followed was the angry, silent treatment I've come to know all too well after she's had a bit to drink. When we got home, I pulled into the driveway, and almost immediately, a car pulled up in front of our house. It was my buddy from the soccer team. My wife had already decided she was going, despite my feelings. I was beyond angry. I walked up to his car and told him straight up that I wasn't okay with this, and he needed to leave. But instead of listening, my wife got out of our car and climbed into his. They drove off, and I was left standing there, speechless. In my rage, I plugged in the old iPad I had bought her years ago. It was outdated, but I knew it was still connected to her messaging and social media accounts. I saw exactly where she was that night, but as much as I tried to stay up waiting for her, I finally passed out around 3 a.m. When I woke up the next morning, she was in bed. I had no idea when she'd come home. I didn't wake her up, didn't kiss her goodbye, something I had never done before. I left for work that morning feeling betrayed, angry, and completely lost. I was beyond pissed. Before I left for work that morning, I grabbed the iPad and threw it in my briefcase. I just couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal from the night before. Once I got to work, after a few meetings and phone calls, I pulled out the iPad to check on something, and it lit up with a notification from a messaging app. Buddy is typing. My heart sank. I opened the app, and what I saw stopped me cold. It was a horrific exchange of messages. This app was supposed to delete messages after they were read, but the version on this old iPad must have been outdated. I could see everything in real time as they talked about the night before. Buddy was making references to them making love, and mentioned other guys who had fun last night. I almost lost it right there at my desk, but then it got even worse. I sat there, completely numb, as I watched my wife tell Buddy to send her a video of him doing things to himself, which he gladly did, and I had the misfortune of witnessing it. I couldn't handle it anymore. I ran out of my office straight to the bathroom and vomited. I was shaking uncontrollably from what I had just seen. I somehow managed to get myself together enough to ask for permission to leave work for the day. I had to. I was legitimately scared I was going to hurt someone or do something stupid. After spending a few hours trying to calm down, I drove home. When I got there, she was still asleep in bed, completely unaware of the storm that had hit me. I put my stuff down and asked her to come downstairs. We sat across from each other, and I calmly asked her to tell me in detail everything that happened the night before. She stuck to her story, just drinking, playing pool, and talking. Nothing more. Then I asked her when she had last spoken to Buddy. She admitted she'd texted him back and forth a bit that morning but said it wasn't anything important. That's when I dropped the bomb. Would your story change if you knew I saw the entire conversation you had with him this morning? Her face went pale, and she immediately burst into tears. The first thing out of her mouth was, "Are you leaving me?" She came clean. She told me she didn't remember everything clearly but admitted she had sex with Buddy and another teammate last night, and that's all she could recall. There might have been more guys, but she couldn't remember. I felt sick. I asked if this was the first time, and to my horror, she told me it wasn't. She admitted there had been other times. One of them even happened in our house while I was asleep upstairs. That was it. I felt numb to everything. Without a word, I helped her pack a bag, and she left to go stay with her family. She begged me not to tell anyone, pleading for me to keep this quiet. So here I am, alone in this nightmare, 2 weeks out from D-Day, with no idea what to do next. I never thought I'd experience something like this. It's hard to imagine anything worse than discovering your wife was involved in something like this, with guys you welcomed into your life, guys you considered friends. And to find out it's been going on for months with at least one of them, that's a whole new level of betrayal. Now she wants to blame it all on alcohol, saying she'll start going to AA and wants us to go through couples therapy. She's begging for us to come out of this together, but I'm just sitting here, not sure if I can ever trust her again. I'm at a complete loss. I feel like it's a bit late for me to be thinking about this, but here I am, feeling like a chump and drowning in all kinds of emotions, especially guilt. I have a meeting with an attorney tomorrow, and I'm trying to convince myself it's the right choice, even though my wife is really struggling with her alcoholism and genuinely wants to work things out. But honestly, I can't even have a conversation with her without picturing myself caught in a horrible situation. Trust is out the window, and I'm just disgusted by her repeated actions. I know I deserve way better, and while I'm far from perfect, I can't shake this nagging guilt. Is there really no way to reconcile this? Am I really the bad guy here? Any support or words of wisdom would mean the world to me. It feels silly writing this out and seeing it so clearly, but it's tough to just switch off feelings for someone who blindsided you completely. Update. I can't thank everyone enough for the advice and support you've sent my way. It's been almost a month since my last post, and I've had so many people check in, which I really appreciate. Unfortunately, things have gone from bad to worse, like unbelievably evil. I can't find the words to express how devastated I feel. So here's a long update because I need to share the full picture. After my last post, I took your advice and made a few appointments with attorneys and a legal document prep lady to explore my options. My wife didn't know about any of that. We managed a few days without direct contact, but she was insistent that this time she really wanted to make an effort to see a marriage therapist, which I'd been pushing for long before everything hit the fan. Eventually, we got a therapy appointment scheduled, but we had to wait about a week and a half. During that time, I found myself obsessively checking her every move on her iPad, tracking messages, Facebook, Snapchat, you name it. After all that scrutinizing, I was left with no real evidence, and I started to wonder if maybe she was actually feeling remorse. When we finally saw the therapist, he asked us why we were there, and I told her to share her side of the story. She left out some details, but a lot came out. It was all laid bare, and I was just sitting there, feeling completely exposed. When the therapist asked how I felt about my trust in her and our marriage, I just shook my head in disbelief. Instead of answering, I blurted out, "If I don't say this out loud right now, I might never find the words." It hit me. There's no coming back from this. The marriage is over. The vows were broken, my trust shattered, and all that's left for me is to get a divorce. My stomach twisted at the thought, and she completely fell apart, crying hysterically. I continued, "I don't know what can be salvaged here, but I mean it, the marriage is done. I can't pretend to be true to myself if I don't acknowledge how broken this is." Saying it out loud, in front of her and the therapist, brought me a slight sense of relief. The rest of the session was spent with the therapist explaining to her why my feelings were completely rational, given everything that's happened. He focused on calming her down, which I appreciated. He suggested that we see him separately for individual therapy first, with the possibility of discussing reconciliation down the line. I'll be honest, I have no intention of considering that right now, but maybe individual therapy could help me sort through all this. As I prepared for the legal journey ahead, I knew it could get really ugly and financially devastating, especially since I'm the breadwinner in a no-fault state. I've documented the whole legal process, but I'm keeping it private for now. It feels too risky to share everything online. Fast forward about a week and a half, and we'd both had at least one session with the therapist. Her narrative to the family was that we were ending things because of broken vows, but that we were both trying to heal. She was staying with family, while I was still caught up in the obsessive need to check her digital presence for any sign she was slipping back into her old habits. Something many of you warned me about. Then one night, I realized there was one place I hadn't checked: the App Store. I dove into the download history of her iCloud account and saw something shocking. Almost 2 weeks prior, that evening, I discovered she had downloaded a secret texting app on her phone. My gut twisted as I realized she had gone out of her way to hide this from me, even knowing I had her iPad, which she insisted I keep so I could start to trust her again. I think she underestimated how connected all her devices were. I had to find out what was happening in that app. I couldn't control my body as I downloaded the app onto her iPad and tried a few of her common login combinations. Boom, there it was, the truth. Not only had she been messaging someone on this app since our first therapy appointment, but they were still seeing each other during times when she knew I'd be out of the area. I was sick to my stomach. It was 3 in the morning on a weeknight, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. I went into the bathroom, grabbing every prescription medication I could find. With a handful of pills, I returned to my room, sitting on the edge of my bed, sobbing and feeling like I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up my phone and tried to call my mom, but no answer. My sister picked up, and I poured out my heart through violent tears. She could tell I was losing it, and even though I hadn't mentioned the pills, she insisted on staying on the phone with me until I calmed down. Took about an hour, but I eventually felt numb again. After hanging up, I went back to the bathroom and poured the pills back into one of the bottles. I washed my hands and returned to bed, hoping for a couple of hours of sleep that never came. As the hours dragged on, I realized I needed to get out of that house. I couldn't stand being there for another moment. Getting dressed, I threw the bottle of pills and the iPad into my briefcase. Once I arrived at the office, I handed them to my most trusted coworker, asking him to lock them in his desk and not return them to me. No questions asked. He obliged, giving me an understanding pat on the shoulder as I walked away. So there I was, having finally gotten what I'd been searching for. Undeniable proof that not only had my wife cheated, but she was also a cold-blooded liar. For days, I struggled with what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to call her out and tell every family member, friend, and acquaintance about what she had done. I wanted the whole world to know the truth. I knew what she had done and was still doing, but I was already in the process of ending the marriage. However, there was still a window where she could turn nasty, and that thought loomed over me. As days went by, she tried reaching out with texts and calls that went unanswered. Eventually, she even stopped by to check on me, and I nearly lost my cool during that encounter. I decided to play it cool, acting vague and indifferent. I didn't know how to handle the situation until she lost her temper, yelling at me for being weird. That's when I finally asked her point blank, "Have you had any contact with Buddy at all since that night?" She shot back with a firm, "No. I blocked him on everything." I pressed again, "Are you sure about that?" She insisted she hadn't, claiming he was gross and she would never do that to me. Then I dropped the bomb. "So what about this app? And what about this video I recorded on my phone showing the conversations you two have been having? The pictures you sent each other, the plans made to sneak around based on my daily schedule?" She just collapsed to the ground, sobbing and begging me for something. I wasn't even sure what. I kept my tone calm, saying, "Here's the deal. I won't tell anyone about this, but you can't fight me at all during the divorce process. I'll be fair even if I really shouldn't have to be. You'll be served with divorce papers, and if you do nothing about it, then nobody has to know why I'm being so unreasonable. It's your choice." She left, and 2 days later, she was served. Since then, I've kept my word and haven't said a word outside my immediate family. But I know for a fact, thanks to Find My iPhone, that she's been visiting him every single night at his mom's house. Her family thinks she's going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, but my screenshots of her location tell a different story. Honestly, I can't believe she hasn't changed her iCloud password. I keep compiling the evidence, even though I'm not sure why. I'm struggling with anxiety, waiting for this period to pass when she can no longer fight me in court. Meanwhile, her family thinks she's on the right track, while the truth is so far from that. What really stings is the injustice of it all. She gets to be around her family, acting like everything's fine, all while sneaking off each night to be with him. He sneaks home in the middle of the night to keep up appearances, while I head to work each day and come back to an empty, haunting house. I really know what it feels like to be alone in every sense of the word. I've moved past any thoughts of self-harm, but these days are still dark. I'm taking everything hour by hour, day by day, just waiting for the moment when I can leave this hell behind without destroying my finances, and finally leave her in the dust. What I'll do after that, I'm not quite sure yet. Right now, I'm just focused on surviving until that day comes. Thank you all for reading and for the concern, advice, and wisdom you've shared. You've been my one outlet during this time when I feel completely shut out by the world. I may not know any of you personally, but I trust you more than I trust my wife, without a shadow of a doubt. Update 2. This is my third post here and hopefully my last. The incredible support I received has helped me through some of the darkest days of my life. I've waited to update until now because, at long last, my divorce is official. No more hiding out after enduring that absurdly long 6-month cooling-off period, waiting to see if my ex-wife would lie to me again. It's done. I've gone completely no contact, and it feels like I can finally start moving forward with my life. A lot of folks followed my earlier posts, and while they were intense, I should have expected the rest of the cooling-off period to be just as crazy. I wanted to share what's happened since my last update. In my previous post, I mentioned that I was 6 weeks out from D-Day. What I didn't share then was that I had already filed for divorce. I took the advice of many kind Redditors and gave her back the iPad, cutting any ties to devices or accounts that would let me obsess over who she was with or what she was doing. I knew what I wanted out of the divorce process, and while my approach may have hurt me emotionally in the long run, it didn't impact my finances nearly as much. Everything moved at an agonizing snail's pace, but I came to terms with the fact that this woman could never be trusted again. I needed to be rid of her, but I wasn't about to pay her around $2,000 a month in spousal support for half the length of our marriage. Especially since we didn't even have kids together. In my state, since it's a no-fault divorce and I was the breadwinner, there was no way I was going to pay her a dime for what she had done to me. That realization fueled my anger, and I started to devise a plan to get out of this marriage as quickly and completely as possible. Looking back, I'm not particularly proud of the tactics I used to navigate my divorce, but they worked in the end. Still, I feel like my integrity took a hit. It's a matter of opinion, I guess. From where I stand, my actions were mere molehills compared to the mountains of mistrust and pain she caused me. Around the same time as my last post, I had the divorce papers prepared and submitted to the county, but I kept that information from her. She was still living with her family and had never been welcomed back into my home since I made her leave. I arranged a few meetups, trying to convince her that somehow I still wanted to salvage our relationship. A complete lie. In those conversations, I made it clear that, in my mind, our marriage was over. The vows had been broken, and if we were to start fresh, we needed to mutually end this marriage and then begin dating again, courting each other to build something new and stronger. I'm literally cringing as I type this out. I can't believe she actually bought it. I was going to great lengths to make this as easy and painless as possible for her, just trying to get through this phase so we could focus on what was next. A prime example of this was how I had her served with the divorce papers. I arranged for a mutual friend to come over to my house, the place we had lived together, and act as a third wheel during the handoff. She signed the papers without even skimming through them, sealing them up in an envelope. I doubt she ever really dug into the details of those tedious legal forms because I had painted a very pretty picture for myself, one that didn't involve any spousal support beyond splitting what was in our account at the time. Avoiding spousal support was my biggest concern. In the first few months, I tried to buy myself some time to think things through, which meant avoiding her as much as possible. I met her roughly twice a month for dinner or small talk in public places, acting like I cared. Those meetings were always in public, so she wouldn't suspect anything. I never wanted to say I did anything to hurt her. I kept up appearances, making her feel like I was genuinely working through my emotions and seeking forgiveness so we could reconcile. In reality, I had no intentions of doing that. By keeping her in the dark, I managed to cleanly remove her from my bank accounts with her help, get her off the lease, and even have all her possessions moved to a storage unit. I convinced her that we would find a new place together, and having her stuff out of the house would make it feel less haunting as I healed. Lying to her and keeping her in this state of submission made all the difficult separation tasks surprisingly easy. She thought she was doing the right thing for us, which kept the charade going. This strategy carried me through about 4 of the 6 months I needed to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't until early in month 4 that I got a text from a family member she was living with, asking if we were still trying to work things out. This family member knew about Buddy and the truth of the situation, but I was still keeping up my reconciliation act. I replied with a simple yes, why, and received a picture of my wife and Buddy having dinner at a restaurant a city away. The follow-up text said, "This is happening right now." It turned out this family member was out for drinks after work and spotted them together. That's when I completely messed up by letting my emotions get the best of me. I texted my wife right away, asking if we could talk on the phone. She responded with a lie, claiming she was in an AA meeting and would call me as soon as she was done. That's when I snapped back, saying, "I didn't know they held AA meetings at location. And is Buddy now your sponsor?" That got her attention. She called me immediately, yelling and accusing me of stalking her. I fired back with some choice words, definitely not suitable for this sub, and told her off, making it clear that I had no interest in speaking with her again. From that point on, the last 2 months of the divorce saw her diving headfirst into a relationship with Buddy. At first, it was private, but it eventually became public. I had blocked both of them on social media, but news started trickling in through friends. Questions arose, and more people began reaching out to me, wanting to know what was going on. Apparently, my wife got bolder, posting updates and pictures of them together. People started reaching out, asking if I'd share what I knew. I valued my friendships and wanted to salvage them, so I opened up. It didn't take much to sway them. Just telling the truth worked like a charm. Having their support, hearing from those who knew us both that what she did was horrific, felt more validating than the material aspects of the divorce. Finally, I had people to vent to, and boy, did I vent. Almost everyone I spoke with had already communicated with her to find out who this guy was in all those pictures. A common thread emerged. She had drastically downplayed everything that had happened. While she didn't deny that she was the one who cheated, I was more than happy to fill in the details she conveniently left out. Most of our friends and even some of her closest relatives were in shock, and I truly believe they chose to support me. I found myself asking them not to rock the boat until the divorce was finalized. As more time passed and the more public they became, the bolder her social media posts got. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Eventually, I had to tell people to please stop informing me about their developments because it was still causing real emotional pain. Then Valentine's Day rolled around just a few days before the finalization of the divorce. Along with the Day of Love came 3 screenshots from different people, all showing the same social media post. The 2 of them embraced, with a romantic caption about how amazing it was that God had delivered such a wonderful man into her life. She said she couldn't be happier and hoped he'd be the one she'd marry someday. It was like a punch in the gut. I did get a kick out of the confused comments from extended family and distant friends asking who this guy was, and the shocked emoji faces were somewhat satisfying. I'd love to say that their relationship doesn't bother me, but it does, deep down. I still feel a profound sense of loss, mixed with pure disgust and regret for not seeing the monster in front of me for so many years. And as for Buddy, I have no respect for him and zero energy to worry about him. He's bound to face his own karma for sticking around with her. My ex-wife feels like a stranger to me now, and in a way that's making it easier to move forward. Finally, the day arrived last week for the court-ordered dissolution of our marriage. I hadn't been served any papers, and her chance to fight for anything we hadn't already agreed upon had passed. I managed to keep my entire 401k, secured no spousal support, and emerged without any additional debt in my name. Best of all, I never have to deal with her again. At the end of that day, I blocked her number on my phone. The next day, 7 of my closest friends, 6 of whom were mutual friends, threw me a divorce party. They posted updates on Snapchat throughout the night. It was truly a celebration worth documenting, and I gladly blocked my ex from social media after that. Even her maid of honor was at the party and wants nothing to do with her anymore. But there's one final internal struggle I'm grappling with, and I could use some insight. During my obsessive phase, when I was scouring her digital footprints, I discovered she had been sleeping with a guy from her hometown throughout all of this. The kicker? This guy is an old flame of hers and has a wife and kid at home. I'm torn about whether I should find a way to let the wife know. I feel ashamed that I haven't said anything yet, but the thought of destroying a family weighs heavily on my conscience. Should I tell her? Should I identify myself? Or keep this to myself? This situation is like a persistent worm in my head, making me nauseous and anxious, and I've even had nightmares about it. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been a while. In 17 days, it will be the 2nd anniversary of my D-Day. Honestly, looking back at my previous posts, I never thought I'd make it this far in terms of healing from the pain, burden, and depression caused by my ex-wife's actions. Many of you caring folks have reached out for an update, so here it is, hopefully my final one. If you're just joining the conversation, here's a bit of light reading to catch you up on the situation, especially if you enjoy being stunned, flabbergasted, or appalled. It's been a while since my last update, but some important events have unfolded that really showcase how appalling a person can be. After the divorce was finalized in February 2019, I tried my best to go no contact. Easier said than done, right? I didn't communicate with her directly, but occasionally I'd catch glimpses of her life through posts from distant family members or friends who hadn't been blocked yet. My true friends did their best to keep updates to themselves, but some news was just too big to hold back. The first blockbuster came in May 2019 when one of my best friends called to tell me my ex-wife was getting remarried to a guy from Tennessee. Wait, what? Yeah, it was true. My friend's husband hadn't blocked my ex on Facebook and managed to grab screenshots of everything leading up to this shocking news. Apparently, her relationship with Buddy didn't last long after the divorce. I don't know the details or how it ended, but honestly, it's not surprising. Starting in April, her Facebook was filled with cryptic status updates hinting that everything was happening for a reason and that she was falling in love with someone. Poor soul. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, in July, she posted a picture that caught everyone off guard. It showed her and some random guy, someone none of us knew, standing in a courthouse holding hands with rings on their fingers, proudly displaying what looked like a marriage certificate. The post was tagged in California, and her caption read something like, "Excited to start the rest of my life with such an amazing man. Feeling so blessed. Look out, Tennessee. Here we come." I know this entire story may seem unbelievable, but I swear I'm writing the honest truth. I feel the need to warn you before continuing. I couldn't shake my curiosity about the situation, so I reached out to one of my ex-wife's cousins by marriage, someone I got along with pretty well. They filled me in on the details. Her new husband was someone she had met online and had been talking to for a few months via phone and text. Apparently, they fell hard and fast for each other. He proposed over a phone call. She said yes, and they couldn't wait to get married. Within a week of the proposal, she was trying to inform her family and invite them to the wedding, which took place in a random town about 2 hours from our hometown. For some reason, he flew out to California, and they got married on a Saturday. This was also the first time they had met in person, yet somehow they were now husband and wife. The kicker, according to her cousin, is that not a single person from her family attended the courthouse wedding. I'm not sure if that was due to the short notice or a lack of respect, but they tied the knot in a pretty unceremonious way, something that I imagine would have bothered her a lot. That Sunday was spent packing a moving truck with all her belongings, and by Monday, they were headed east to Tennessee. Couldn't believe it. I had heard enough from various people to know that this story and timeline were true, but it still felt unbelievable. That poor guy. If only he knew what he was getting into. I like to think that if he did know, he would have thought twice about getting married in California, a no-fault state where he could end up facing the same issues I had. Hopefully, he was just uninformed rather than being naive. For my part, I did my best to shake the thoughts of them from my mind, and I took some comfort in knowing they were moving far away, reducing the chances of randomly running into her ever again. Summer came and went in 2019, but right in the middle of fall, another bombshell dropped. While scrolling through Instagram, a video popped up on my screen. My ex-wife holding a plate in front of her father, who had his eyes covered with his hands. Before I could process what I was looking at, I realized the plate had a single cookie covered in blue frosting. My ex-wife's voice came through, counting down, 3, 2, 1, as her father uncovered his eyes. It was a freaking gender reveal video. Why am I seeing this? Her mother had just created a public Instagram account and posted this video of her husband's excitement. Apparently, the algorithm thought I'd want to see it since I might know them. I completely lost it. It was a rough few days filled with sleepless nights. The sick feeling I had was a mix of disgust, pain, frustration, and even a bit of jealousy. One of my greatest aspirations in life is to become a father, and had all of this not happened, this very well could have been our time. Sometimes I can't help but think that if we had a child together, it could have been my child. I should be the one becoming a father. At 32, I always imagined I'd be there by now, yet here I am, not even on a path toward a relationship, let alone fatherhood. I know I still have time ahead of me to achieve that dream with someone I love and am happy with, but it's hard not to compare where I am in life to where I thought I'd be by now. The truth is, in this scenario, I'd much rather be in my position than that soon-to-be father's. I can only imagine that the baby is probably born by now. Thankfully, I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who haven't mentioned it, and part of me knows it's better not to know than to face the alternative. Still, I can't help but wonder every now and then. The good news is that more and more days go by when I don't think about her and her dumpster fire of a life at all. I see that as progress. Of course, there are still bad days, which have been made exponentially worse by the stay-at-home orders. I'm lucky to work as an independent contractor, which allows me to work from home, but those days can be incredibly lonely. I make it a point to get out and walk, but I really miss the gym. I've been visiting my parents as much as I can just to have some company that isn't a webinar or a phone call. I know this situation affects all of us. It's not something I'm going through alone. When I start to feel hopeful, I think back to those early days after my D-Day when I thought I'd never make it through. Yet here I am, getting through this difficult time as well, one day at a time, or even one moment at a time if that's what it takes. Time moves forward, no matter how slowly it feels sometimes. I want to thank you all for taking the time to read my update and catch up on what's happened. I sincerely appreciate everyone who commented, messaged, and encouraged me through this challenging chapter of my life. I can honestly say that it was the strength of this community that saved me and gave me another shot at living a happy life instead of a dismal existence. Here's to another 2 years of surviving and thriving. Update 4. It's now been 3 years since D-Day and more than a year since my last post. This past year has been the first where I've been able to truly focus on myself. I don't have any updates on my ex-wife or her situation since I've gone completely no contact with her and her entire family. I've muted and blocked various forms of communication, including mutual friends, to prevent any unwanted information from slipping through. I knew from past experiences that keeping anything related to her or her family off my radar would give me the best chance to focus on my life moving forward without getting lost in the past. Honestly, going no contact with her family was really tough. They were my family too until she made her choices. I loved some of them as if they were my own blood, and coming to terms with losing those relationships felt hard and unfair, but ultimately it was necessary. I can see that this strategy is working for me. As time goes on, there are far more days when I don't think about her at all, compared to when I do. And when I do think of her, it's more of a thank God I dodged that crap storm, rather than feeling sorrow or pain. During the pandemic, I made a significant change in my career by starting my own independent consulting business in tech support and IT system design. It was a leap of faith that paid off quickly. I landed a few contracts, including 2 with government organizations in my county. It's been a lot of hard work, but both contracts have been renewed for another 12 months. and there are no signs of slowing down. Working for myself and having the freedom to make decisions without anyone else depending on my success has been invigorating. I take so much pride in the work I deliver to my clients, and that sense of self-worth has made a huge difference in how I view the past. I'm not as worried about the present or future anymore. My work life is solid, my finances are the best they've ever been, and my mind is mostly free from the memories that haunted me. Plus, I'm in better shape physically than I have been since all of this began, and I'm feeling good about myself as a man. That said, I do have some concerns about my general lack of trust in people, especially women in a romantic sense. Ironically, my lack of trust made it easy to leave my job and go into business for myself. I only have to rely on myself to get the job done. However, when it comes to romance, my desire to be with someone has faded significantly. I'm fine being alone, and during my brief foray into online dating, I realized it's mostly a cesspool of broken people. After 3 or 4 underwhelming dates, I came to the conclusion that most women weren't really looking for anything substantial. What I found during my brief time in online dating was a mix of attention-seeking women who wanted the undivided focus of the men they were speaking to. I doubt that any of those dates were only talking to me at the time, which made me feel like I was condoning their attempts to play the field. I've had enough of that for a lifetime. I don't want to sound disrespectful to any woman, nor do I want to come off as someone who's bitter or going my own way. There's a big part of me that yearns for connection and intimacy. I genuinely desire to share my life with someone. However, just because I feel that way doesn't mean I'm willing to let just anyone into my life to avoid being alone. I'm ready to be patient and do the work to keep my life on the right path. I'm keeping my heart, eyes, and ears open to the idea that I can love again someday. Yet, I have this annoying self-dialogue that pops into my head more often than I'd like to admit. It reminds me that I'm 34 years old and should have a wife and kids by now, living a happy life like my friends who are paying mortgages, going on trips, and doting on their children. Then I catch myself thinking, what do I have? Money in the bank? Does that really make me feel better about my life? I know I need to work on this mindset. Holding myself to a theoretical timeline isn't what I need right now. For the time being, I'm grateful for the life I'm leading. I feel blessed beyond belief not to be living a different version of my life tied to my ex-wife. I'm hopeful that if I keep prioritizing myself and making the most of my days, I'll be able to look back one day and say I'm proud of who I am. I want to feel like I made the most of being dealt a pretty bad hand to start with. Thank you all for your time, advice, support, and words of wisdom. I truly wouldn't have made it without you.